welcome to our 16th episode. Today we're going to be learning about Samson and who he was. We start our study in Judges 16, verses 1 through 9. Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there, and went into her. When it was told to the Gazites, saying, "Samson has come here," they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. And they kept silent all night, saying, "Let us wait until morning light, then we will kill him." Now Samson lay until midnight, and at midnight he arose and took hold of the doors of the city gate, and two of the posts, and pulled up along with the bars. And then he put them on his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of the mountain, which is opposite Hebron. After this, it came about that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came up to her, and said to her, "Entice him, and see where his great strength lies, and how we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him. Then we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength is, and how you may be bound to afflict you." Samson said to her, "If they bind me with 7 fresh cords that have not been dried, then I will become weak, and be like any other man." Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh cords that had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had men lying in wait in an inner room, and she said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." But he snapped the cords as a string of tow snaps when it touches fire. So his strength was not discovered. Samson was tempted here, and doesn't start off this whole situation on the right foot. God still used him even though he sinned, because his plan was greater. Delilah was the 3rd Philistine Samson had fallen in love with. She knew Samson was strong, so she had a dangerous intention to deceive him into him telling her his secret. Now we continue to Judges 16, 10-27. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Behold, you have deceived me, and you told me lies. Now please tell me how you may be bound." He said to her, "If they bind me tightly with new ropes that have not been used, then I will become weak like any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." For the men were lying in wait in the inner room. But he snapped the ropes from his arms like a thread. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Up to now you have deceived me and told me lies. Tell me how you may be bound." And he said to her, "If you weave the 7 locks of my hair with the web and fasten it with a pin, then I will become weak and be like any other man." So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his hair and wove them into the web. And she fastened it with the pin, and said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." But he awoke from his sleep and pulled out the pin from the loom and the web. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have deceived me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength is." It came about when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, that his soul was annoyed to death. So he told her all that was in his heart, and said to her, "A razor has never come on my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak and be like any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart, she sent and called the Lord of the Philistines, saying, "Come upon once more, for he has told me all that is in his heart." Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. She made him sleep on her knees, and called for a man, and had him shave off the 7 locks of his hair. Then she began to afflict him, and his strength left him. She said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he awoke from his sleep, and said, "I will go out as other times, and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Then the Philistines seized him, and gouged out his eyes. And they brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with bronze chains, and he was a grinder in the prison. However, the hair of his head began to grow again after it was shaved off. Now the lords of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their god, and to rejoice, for they said, "Our God has given Samson our enemy into our hands." When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, "Our God has given our enemy into our hands, even the destroyer of our country, who has slain many of us." It so happened when they were in high spirits, they said, "Call for Samson, that he may amuse us." So they called for Samson, and from the prison he entertained them. And they made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them." Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And about 3,000 men and women were on the roof, looking on while Samson was amusing them. We can tell from the last couple of verses that Samson didn't look strong, revealing that his strength was supernatural and was all God. Samson lies to Delilah 3 times, but however refuses to leave her, therefore she bounds him. Samson's heart was with Delilah, but hers was not with him. Samson sinned by letting his guard down and yielding to the temptation. Samson's strength was not in his hair, but in his relationship with God. When that fell apart, so did his strength. Samson is attracted to these women with his eyes, which is ironic when he gets his eyes gouged out. When Samson was in the dungeon, God begins giving him his power back. The Philistines mock Samson, so he ends up killing as many of them as he could. We finish our story in Judges 16 verses 28 through 31. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord God, please remember me and please strengthen me just this time. O God, that I may be avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested and braced himself against them, the one with his right hand and the other one was with his left. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he bent with all his might so that the house fell on the lords and the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed in his life. Then his brothers and all his father's household came down, took him, brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. Thus he had judged Israel 20 years. Samson was a hero even though he did not celebrate his life when it ended. His life should have ended different, but it didn't because God still used him. Suicide is a sin, but this does not mean Samson did not go to heaven. It's not unpardonable. Samson's desire was not to kill himself, but to kill as many Philistines as he could. His desire for love led him here. We also see what happens when you are alone through Samson, because every time he was tempted or tricked, he was alone. This story should be an encouragement to everyone, showing us that God can still use us, even if we do mess up. That's all for this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and have an amazing day. Bye.